Welcome back to the MovieBabble Podcast. You got me, Brennan, hosting this week. I'm joined by Nick. How's it going?
What's going on, man?
You know what? It's not too bad. I mean, things are slowly starting to open up. We saw last week, obviously, Colin got to go to a real movie theater. That's pretty exciting. So, I mean, there might be a light at the end of the tunnel, we hope.
Yeah, I'm still very jealous that he actually got to go out into civilization. It's cool, though, because I'm actually down south with my parents, and I think the restrictions are a little more lax down here, so it is just nice. Like, I got to go to a winery yesterday, and I was like, holy shit, I'm in public. This is incredible. So hopefully this is a sign of more to come, and we don't have a second wave and get sad again in a few months.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, we'll see what happens, but hopefully everyone takes the best precautions out there for sure. But hopefully things are getting better. I know up here things are definitely starting to get better. The curve is looking a lot better than it was a few weeks ago, so I hope that's a good sign. But we do have a little bit of news this week. A little bit of release dates got jumbled up, and also just a quick tidbit kind of opened things up. The Wretched, I still don't really know what it's about, but it now has 6 weekends atop of the box office. It clocked in last weekend with a little over $200,000. We actually reported last weekend that Becky was number one, and it was, but drive-in numbers didn't come in until midweek, so the Wretched actually jumped in ahead of it. So now it is the longest-running movie atop the box office for about 3 years, I think.
That's so funny. Good for the Wretched, because I've seen this movie, and it's actually just a really fun throwback horror movie. So I guess for people who don't know, basically it's about this kid who his parents have divorced, and he's going to visit his dad for the summer, and he has a job at the local lake. He's working on a few boats, and then there's a monster that comes back from the woods, and it terrorizes his next door neighbors. And the monster itself takes on stuff of separation and divorce. And it's a really fun little horror movie. It's the one where no one believes the kids. Like, they're kind of like no one believes them. They're just like the troubled youth, and they have to like figure it out themselves. It's a really fun 80s style summer camp throwback movie. So I'm happy for it. It's a fun little story in all of this muck.
Yeah, it sounds like a solid drive-in film, because I know that's where obviously it's making the rounds, right? And I feel like that'd be something fun to kind of go to the drive-in and see kind of a little bit of a throwback type horror film there.
Yeah, it's definitely that kind where it's really fun. It's not too scary. The monster's cool. It's really cool practical effects on the monster, but yeah, it's very fun. Actually, the lead actor in it, John Paul Howard, I think is really good. I'm interested to see what he does next, because he has that typical like kind of like just like annoying guy leading man role that you see in a lot of these like in lesser versions of this movie. But he just has just a lot of great charisma and personality, where he just adds a little something extra to it, and you're like, I don't know quite what it is, but I like this guy. So hopefully this is, I mean, still not great circumstances for everything, but I hope maybe The Wretched turns into something for all the people involved, and it gets a little cold audience, because it certainly does feel like a movie that gets that kind of just very beloved cult audience down the road.
Yeah, no, it's interesting for sure, and I feel like there's a lot of people that'll definitely months or years from now kind of look back on this and remember their trip to the drive-in where they got to see The Wretched. Moving forward a little bit, though, we did have some announcements of release dates switching up. Warner Bros. Specifically is what we're pointing to here. So Tenet, sadly, we've been watching this for a while, but I think this is not an awful sign. So Tenet has been moved from July 17 to July 31. This means that Wonder Woman 1984, which is supposed to come out in mid-August, has now been moved to October 2nd. So I think the main reason for this is obviously Tenet and just everyone behind that picture wants to see at least 80 to 90% of theaters open by the time it comes out. They're probably a little bit nervous for that number to be kind of at that point on July 17, so they've bumped it back 2 weeks. So I think that's still promising. However, it seems like Mulan, which is obviously the Disney property, is set for July 24, and I read somewhere that now Warner Bros. Is going to be putting Inception on July 17, so maybe to mark the 10-year anniversary of the film. And a lot of people think that's just so Warner Bros. Can claim like we were the first ones back, you know. But I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting claim. Maybe it's just to drum up some enthusiasm for Tenet in a couple weeks after that, but that's a little bit of the release date mix up now.
Yeah, it seems smart on Warner Brothers' part because it seems like everyone's looking at the July 4th weekend where we want to open things back up. So who knows what happens after that? If there's some kind of spike, and maybe that does make a little sense to push it back 2 weeks, so you have 2 weeks of data to see what's going on since things open back up a little bit. But yeah, I think Warner Brothers has always been looking at Tenet as kind of like the grand reopening of the movie industry, and I think just with people just stuck inside, I think there is something really powerful about if we all get a chance to just go out and see a big time movie. So I think I understand why they've been kind of reticent to like get rid of this spot while other studios are like Universal just pushes Fast 12, whatever it is, to next year just from the start. But yeah, I think all this sort of makes sense. I think it's a reasonable business decision and not just a punt on this year entirely.
No, definitely, for sure. And I don't think any of the further down the line release dates got moved for Tenet. Actually, I know one. Sorry, not for Tenet. Sorry, for Warner Bros. But I know Kong v Godzilla was supposed to come out in November. That has now been moved to summer 2021. I think this is a smart move for that movie. It feels like a summer movie rather than a November movie. And in addition to that, November seems to be getting very, very busy. I think a lot of these summer movies that were getting pushed definitely went to November. No Time to Die is definitely one that I can point to. Black Widow is another. So it's probably smart for Kong v Godzilla to move, especially considering that franchise probably doesn't quite have the weight to go up against Marvel and No Time to Die. But I think it is definitely a summer movie as well. So 2021 is probably a good spot for that.
Yeah, and especially because King of the Monsters just didn't do particularly well at the box office. Like, it did fine. It's like I don't think many people lost their jobs over the box office returns on that one, but it didn't do great. So any chance you can give that movie to give it space from all these other movies, I think is just really worthwhile. Because yeah, like November through like December is just going to be crowded with stuff. Just so much stuff is in there, and I can't imagine all of it stays there if we all get back to some sort of normalcy in the months to come.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, and this is kind of the first thing kind of pointing to that we might see another little sort of shakeup, especially with how busy it is. So moving away from that, we're going to look at the Netflix top 10 as we have been. Starting at number 1 is Spike Lee's new Netflix original movie, Da 5 Bloods. We're going to talk about that right after we run through this. 365 DNI at number 2. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs at 3. The Guest at 4. The Night Clerk at 5. That's holding on a couple weeks now. The Last Days of American Crime at 6. And a quick little tidbit about this. I think it's still at 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I looked at the running time for this movie, and it's 2.5 hours. And it kind of piqued my interest. I was like, has there ever been a 0% Rotten Tomatoes movie longer than that? And I went through them all. And I think this is the longest 0% movie on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oof. Yeah, I've been staring at this movie for a while. I know I'm going to do a big catch up in the weeks to come, and I just know that I'm going to have to sit through this slog. It seems like everyone hates it. You read all the reviews, and everyone's just like, I hate this movie, and this like should be like, I think it was David Ehrlich's review for IndieWire where he was like, this movie is so bad it should be illegal, which is really, really, really funny. It's like got a 16% on Metacritic. It's just, everyone seems to hate this movie. And I don't know, when something, a 0%er at 2.5 hours just sounds like the worst thing. I'll figure out better ways to spend that time. Thank you very much.
It's rough. It's rough for sure. And then at 7, The Help holds on another week here. Uncut Gems at 8, so now that's 3 weeks on this list. Despicable Me returns. Last week was the first week in months that an Illumination movie was not in the top 10, but Despicable Me is now back at number 9 and Clueless at number 10. So let's go back to the top with Da 5 Bloods. I know that I watched it. You haven't. Are you looking forward to this movie? I remember we did a most anticipated of the year back in January, and this was one that we were both definitely talking about.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see this movie. Just life got on a little way this week already, so I'm really excited to sit down maybe tomorrow night. And I'm one of the fun things that I've talked about before is that one of my buddies and I, we sit down over FaceTime, we watch a movie together, and we're debating between this and The King of Staten Island for our kind of group watch tomorrow. So, but yes, I will be watching this soon because it feels like it's oddly like the most perfect time for a Spike Lee movie to come out, given just like we're in week 2 or 3 of protests around the world, and specifically in the United States. It seems like I know there was no possible way Netflix could have ever imagined this, but it feels like this is like probably like the perfect time for this movie.
You know what? From the opening scene, like literally from the jump, it feels like an absolute mirror on everything that's going on right now, and it's a crazy thing to watch. I know obviously they didn't plan for that, as you said, but it's just weird from the opening scene. I mean, the whole movie obviously isn't a complete mirror. There's a lot of other stuff there. Obviously, it's about some Vietnam War vets that are going back for some. They want to tie up some loose ends back there. I don't want to go into the actual plot too much, but from the get-go, there's just some imagery that really is quite a interesting compare and contrast to what we're going through now. This is a fantastic movie. I did not get to go to Sundance like you and Colin, so I haven't seen as much quality 2020 movies. So this is already shot up to my number 1 of the year at this point. Like it's a fantastic movie, and definitely after you and Colin check it out, I'd love to talk about potentially how far this thing could go in award season. I know it's June, but I just think that this movie definitely it touches a lot of bases. Like it's a film that obviously you have that traditional Spike Lee strengths, which is the screenplay. But I think that also just the fact that it's a 2.5 hour sort of a war epic in a way, you're going to be touching on several other categories like sound, cinematography, production design, all that sort of stuff. But no, it's a fantastic movie. There's a lot there, a lot to unpack. But I loved it.
Yeah, I can't wait. I've gained such an appreciation for Spike Lee recently. I think some people, what they don't really love about him is kind of how in your face he is as just like a filmmaker, and like obviously everyone knows him as just a presence, as a celebrity figure. But I think I kind of love it. Like all of his movies, like I don't think you would ever call any of them subtle, but that's not necessarily what they're trying to do either. I think he's one of the few filmmakers that really just blows in the face of the kind of the tired like show don't tell adage that we use. I don't think that necessarily works, and I think he's a great example of like he can kind of lecture you, and it's still like the most captivating and like amazing thing ever. And you just look at like the end of Black Klansman with the Charlottesville videos and all that stuff. Like he will go there, and I really appreciate that about him. So I can't wait. I'm really looking for it. Yeah, I really want to dive into this movie as soon as I see it, because I'm sure there's plenty to dig into.
Yeah, and you know what? This is a director in Spike Lee who has definitely found himself again. You could definitely argue that the last 10 to 15 years prior to Black Klansman, he had a ton of misses. He had a couple okay movies in there, but he had a lot of misses. After what was a really strong 1990s and late 80s when he first came onto the scene, and even early 2000s, he had a few good movies sprinkled in there, but he had a lot of misses these last 15 years. And Black Klansman and now this, in my opinion, these are back-to-back really strong movies. I like this one more than Black Klansman after just one watch, but he's back for sure.
Yeah, he had that very, very bizarre stretch. He did the remake of Old Boy, I think it was 2013, which just felt very weird. It kind of felt like a director for hire job for him there, which is just very strange considering how strong of a voice he is, and just like he's probably one of the more important filmmakers ever. So that was just very strange. So yeah, weirdly, I have a lot of blind spots when it comes to Spike Lee. I've seen like Do the Right Thing and all those really kind of like his biggest movies, but I haven't seen Chirac, but I'm really interested in looking back on that, and I'm hoping that the Defy of Bloods kind of sparks something in me to kind of explore a lot of his movies, because I think recently it makes sense that when one of his movies is coming out, people are going to talk more about his other movies, but it seems like there is kind of some sort of kind of looking back at some of these movies, and maybe they're a little more appreciated than we kind of, or like a little better than we give them credit for. So I'm looking forward to diving back into his filmography and not just this movie.
Definitely. I mean, it's something that we definitely have to jump into next week for sure. But just for me on first watch, it's great. Not too many issues. Like I guess there are a few moments that I don't know. No, this is a really strong movie overall. Like that. I mean, the one thing I do want to point to, you've probably heard about it on Twitter maybe is Delroy Lindo's performance in this movie. Best of the year for me right now. Like he gave a performance so compelling, so captivating, and quite moving. It's incredible.
Yeah, the cast in this movie is unbelievable. I mean, just multiple generations, and I know that's kind of like they're mirroring the two and their younger selves and older selves. But you have Chadwick Boseman in there. Like it's like I just get so excited. I'm so mad I haven't seen this yet. I just really want to see it.
For sure. So next week we'll definitely do a good dive into this one. But yeah, that's the top 10. I mean, I guess we can touch on a few things there. There are a few, obviously, Netflix originals there. Uncut Gems kind of sticking on. Have you given it a rewatch yet since it's dropped on United States Netflix?
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Just shout out to Uncut Gems. Just I adore you so much, and I will devote every single podcast episode to it from here on out if we get enough interest in it. We'll break down every single minute of the movie. It'll be great for everyone.
And kind of just rounding out the top 10, you have Clueless at the bottom, which I know Colin said he was watching it for the first time this week, so I wonder what he thought of it. But yeah, that's the top 10. Let's move into some other recent releases now, because it wasn't just The Five Bloods. I think this was a pretty busy weekend in terms of streaming. So let's jump into the first one here. I didn't watch it. I'm pretty sure you did, though. Artemis Fowl.
Oof. That's my review of Artemis Fowl. It's where to start? It is interesting because there is a lot to talk about this week, and it feels like if we weren't all in a global pandemic, it would feel like a very normal week at the movies. Like you have three big time movies in The Five Bloods, Artemis Fowl, and The King of Staten Island. But yeah, there's Artemis Fowl has quietly been one of the most like disastrous like pre-production, post-production, kind of just downfalls in recent memory. So. Yeah, this movie I think it started in pre-production, like with like talks about getting cast together and development. It worked it was like 2000 when that started. So this has been squarely in development hell for a while. And then now we have what we have now, which it was delayed multiple times. I think the first trailer came out like in like the summer of 2018 or something like that. This movie's been pushed back so many times, and now it's unceremoniously dumped on Disney Plus, and there is very much a reason for it because it is very, very bad. And I think I see people are making the comparison to Cats, which I don't think anything deserves that. Cats is just, it's in its own league as far as I'm concerned. But it is very, very goofy. But I think that part of that is people just kind of like starved for content and looking for things to talk about. And since there's nothing else really going on, we can all dunk on Artemis Fowl for a little bit. But it is a very, very bad movie that was clearly cut to shreds in post-production. You can kind of tell where the lead kid, he looks like he's jumping back and forth in age, I mean, with reshoots and things like that. It's just one of those movies. It reminds me a lot of The Dark Tower, where it's like this very sprawling, beloved book series that has been distilled down to like a 90-minute movie. I think it's very strange. Artemis Fowl, when it was supposed to come out in 2019, it was right around 2 hours in runtime, I think, right around like 155 or something like that. Now it's been released on Disney Plus at right around, with including all end credits, 94 minutes. So they clearly cut out so much of this movie, and they had to rejigger it a lot because there's like 2 or 3 framing devices for the plot so that you can kind of understand what's happening, but you still don't. Yeah, this is a mess. Josh Gad's character's name is Mulch Diggums, so that kind of tells you all you need to know about this movie. It seems like no one's really particularly happy with it, because I know the Artemis Fowl books are beloved, and it seems like it diverted from the source material quite a bit, and then it's just also not a very good movie, so everyone coming new to it is kind of just like, what the hell is this? This is pretty bad. So yeah, this is not a good movie whatsoever. It's really, really bad. It's one of the bigger disasters of recent memory. So yeah, Disney, it's very interesting because you look at Disney's work and they're very successful with Marvel, and even the Star Wars movies are what they are content wise, but they're still making a good amount of money. But they've really fumbled a lot of their live action just that productions at Walt Disney Studios, whether it be A Wrinkle in Time or just any of their live action retellings. It doesn't really seem like they have a strong direction for cultivating new IP, and that's probably why they keep going back to old stuff, because they're really struggling to find new sources. But this is just the newest example of that. This is Artemis Fowl is not good. It's not good at all.
I just loved coming onto the pod today. I messaged you talking about planning out what we were going to talk about, and I love how I saw The Five Bloods and you saw Artemis Fowl.
I took the bullet this week. It's really, really tough. I feel bad. It's such a like you have Kenneth Branagh as the director here. Colin Farrell's in this movie. You have Judi Dench just in a hilarious performance where she's talking with a very gruff voice as like the leader of like the fairies or whatever. I don't even know. She's like an elf fairy. I don't know. It's very confusing. And Josh Gad is there as well. There's at one point in the movie, Josh Gad burrows into he elongates his mouth to make it really big in CGI and disgusting, and then he burrows into the ground, and there's dirt coming out of his butt. So that happens in this movie. This happens in a movie released by Disney. So yeah, it's Artemis Fowl it's just a fumbled mess, and I hope Colin Farrell got a nice beach house with the paycheck he got for this movie. So that's it's boy, Artemis Fowl.
Yeah, that sounds quite rough. I'm not familiar with the books. I know some people who are. And then also, I remember just seeing the posters for this movie up all on the theater walls last year. So yeah, it's definitely gone through a tough time, and it's probably funny now to see the actor. He probably looks a lot older now than actually in this film. And as you said, there's obviously a lot of issues with the reshoots and how he looks, but that's a tough story. And the other recent release that you and me haven't seen yet, but we're planning to very soon, is the new Judd Apatow film, The King of Staten Island, starring Pete Davidson. I've heard a lot of really good things about this movie so far. I'm looking forward to it. How about you?
I am looking forward to it very much, and it is funny though, because I think at this point we all kind of know what to expect from a Judd Apatow movie, where he's going to blend his really good comedy with a lot. He's going to tug on your heartstrings, and the movie's also going to be way longer than it should be. And then so you look at the runtime of The King of Staten Island, and it's 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it's like perfect. that this is a Judd Apatow movie. It is interesting though, because it's like I feel like there was one roast on Comedy Central when those were still a thing. When Seth Rogen went up there and made this joke about how all Judd Apatow movies are 30 minutes too long, and it was like everyone loved it because it's like such a recognized thing that all of his movies are bloated, and it's just interesting that he doesn't try to go against that and maybe cut down his movies a little bit. But regardless of that, I like his movies a lot. I have been anxiously awaiting what he would direct next since Trainwreck back in 2015. So. And looks like this is a really touching story because obviously it pulls on Pete Davidson's real life and how his father died in 9/11 attacks. So there's just a lot to pull from there. So I am really looking forward to it, and I'm interested to see how this movie uses Pete Davidson, because I don't think we've quite figured out how we feel about him as a celebrity, or what roles he should be in, or what his personality is as a movie star. And I think Judd Apatow is really good at bringing that out. We've seen that so many times with Seth Rogen and all of his and Paul Rudd and Jonah Hill. He's really figured out ways to kind of rely on their strengths.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you're right. I think Pete Davidson's the type of person that we know him, but we don't know his abilities yet. So I think this is definitely a great way for him to kind of flex a little bit more, or just for us to see kind of who he is as an actor, and there's definitely some potential there. What's your favorite Judd Apatow movie?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because a lot of his stuff runs together for me, because obviously he's also a very strong producer, and he works on all of these other projects as well. But I think I always go back to Knocked Up is my favorite, or it's either between that or Trainwreck. I really love Trainwreck a lot, and it's kind of makes me sad that Amy Schumer didn't become a bigger movie star afterwards. But I think depending on the day, I flip back and forth between those two.
Okay, yeah. I mean, a a lot. You're right. A lot of his movies do kind of blend because he is a big time producer as well. The 40-year-old version is always a good go to in terms of comedy. Yeah, just with Knocked Up, I haven't seen it in so long. I can't really talk about it much, but I know Funny People is another one that kind of is in the same vein, how it's incredibly long, but it's another good Sandler performance. I don't know if you're familiar with the film at all, but that's another movie of his that's good, but it's about 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really like Funny People. I think the first half of that movie is like maybe Judd Apatow's best stuff like he's ever done. Like I feel like the movie just should have ended when Adam Sandler like got his diagnosis that he was cured basically. And I guess some minor spoilers for Funny People, but that's like halfway through the movie, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, I think like the first part of that I think it's like some of the best acting Sandler's ever done. I think there's some really good stuff there, but yeah, it is just so long. I still recommend it. I think it's a good movie, but yeah, there's just so much fat in that movie. And I think that was the movie where everyone was like, "Oh yeah, you like Judd Apatow, you need to cut down your movies. you put way too much stuff in there." But I also really I like parts of This Is 40. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's like bougie as hell because it's like total like first world problems. Like, oh, we're like running out of money, but we also have all this like great stuff, and it's like oh no, we have to like downsize slightly from our really super expensive house to a slightly smaller house. It's like there's a lot of that stuff in there, but I think there's a lot of like it's like one of the few comedies that like deals with people like turning 40 and like going through that version of adulthood. So I like that movie a lot too.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that either, but I'll definitely look into his filmography after this movie. So yeah, we'll be checking that out soon. Looking forward to it though. And then just transitioning, I do want to obviously continue the trend that we have been following, which is kind of just talking about what we've been watching lately. For me, just quickly, the other day was the 27th anniversary of Jurassic Park, and that's always been one of my favorites since I was a kid. So I thought, why not give it a rewatch? Every year or two, I rewatch the movie, and I mean, it's still quite fun. I still get chills whenever I hear the theme kick in, and there's just a lot of fun in that movie. For me, it's probably one of the only movies I could watch like all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just one that's so ingrained into it's definitely one of my favorite Spielberg movies. If it isn't as, say, thematically powerful as some of his other ones, but he definitely still tries to weave in a little bit in there. Like, it's not just, like, in my opinion, you don't see movies like this made anymore, it's weird to say about Jurassic Park, but I mean, there's so many moments in this film that are very slow in a way. Like, it's a fast-paced film, but there are a lot of character moments that are slow, and they let you see things in the angles in which he shoots the movie. I mean, it's something that you don't see in modern day blockbusters, and it's just a great Spielberg touch. But yeah, that was a great movie to check out on its 27th anniversary.
Yeah, I think everyone takes the wrong things away from Spielberg movies, where they want to make their own very like fun and energetic adventure movies and really fun characters. But I think he's probably, I mean, this isn't me breaking new ground when I say this, but I think he's just the best, if like one of the best directors, and showing and translating that scale, that sense of scale and like awe to the audience, where, like you said, those angles where he's shooting a lot of those dinosaurs like from below, and so you get how just huge they are, and just the scale is incredible. And I think a lot of that stuff, like, he's great at injecting that kind of wonder into his movies. And yeah, it's like there's a reason he's one of the best. Spielberg is just great at that, and he understands like those little tiny touches can make all the difference.
Yeah, for sure. How about you? What's something you've been checking out recently?
Yeah, I want to recommend The Vast of Night, which was an Amazon Studios movie that came out a few weeks ago. It was actually, weirdly enough, for how good of a movie it is, and I highly recommend it. It didn't play at a lot of festivals. It actually played at Slamdance in 2019, which is the offshoot of Sundance, where it's technically its own festival for, like, a lot of people aren't aware of it, and I actually thought it was like the same. I thought it was like connected with Sundance when the first time I heard of it, but it's just like its own little tiny film festival that goes on at the same time as Sundance. And there's like a lot of smaller movies that play there, and that was basically the only festival that The Vast of Night played at, which I found really interesting. But this is kind of one of the better directorial debuts that I've seen in a really long time. So the director of this movie is Andrew Patterson, and he has such a really strong command of this movie, just in all senses. So I guess just a little background on the movie itself. It takes place in the 1950s, and it follows mostly two actors. The lead girl is played by Sierra McCormick. She's really great. The lead actor is Jake Horowitz, and he's also really, really terrific. But basically, this is just a radio drama where they run a radio show, and Sierra's running the switchboard, and Jake Horowitz's character is like the lead voice on the radio show itself. And they start to hear like these weird frequencies over the radio, and they just like their show is late at night. They know no one's really listening. Everyone's at the basketball game in town, so they're basically like, all right, let's just throw this out onto the sound waves and see what we get. And they got a caller who's like, I know what this sound is, and it's possibly connected to aliens. So it's this whole basically almost in real time. This movie, it's like these two kids trying to connect the dots and see if there are actually aliens in their area. It's a really terrific movie, and it's kind of there's a fun framing device on it that makes it feel kind of like a sort of a really fun old time 50s science fiction tale. It's really, really terrific. It's really slow moving, but also just it hooks you in immediately. Like some of the writing in this movie is incredible, where like a few of the main characters just never show up on screen. You're just listening to them talk over the phone, and there's like 10-minute scenes where people are just having a conversation, and it's the most riveting thing I've seen this year in a lot of cases. So yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough. I don't really want to go too deep into it because I think there's some really interesting surprises to be had. But just a terrific, low budget, wonderful little sci-fi movie that I adored. I think this. I don't think this will end up being one of my top 10 favorite movies of the year, but it is really, really good. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I've actually this movie's piqued my interest recently just because I saw on Letterboxd it was on like the trending list, like the most popular movies at the moment list, kind of what people were watching a lot, and I didn't really know anything about it. But yeah, that's definitely an interesting, sounding concept. And Slamdance, just real quick, that festival, is that in Utah as well?
Yeah, it's literally in the same area, which is why it's so confusing. You'll go to Sundance, and there's also theaters in the same area that are playing Slamdance movies. So it's this very confusing thing. So if you're not really aware, you're like, oh, is Slamdance just like some cute little side project thing that Sundance does? But no, it's an entirely different thing. It's very bizarre because this is like such a great Twilight Zone-ish kind of movie that has so many great strengths and so much great acting and a shared direction. It's kind of strange. I mean, like there's a lot of good movies that come out of the Slamdance Film Festival, but it's just bizarre to me that this didn't play other places too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'll definitely check that out. And just to kind of wrap things up, I do want to say that we will be back next week, definitely, to do kind of a more deep dive into The Five Bloods. I know you're really looking forward to checking it out. I'm looking forward to talking about it with you. Hopefully, we'll have Colin back as well. Thanks for coming on, Nick.
Thank you, Brennan. It's a pleasure as always.
As always, you can check out our content on our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and you can check us out at MovieBabble.com.